Hello, and welcome to my presentation. Today, I will be talking about Reform Judaism by Alexis Green. Judaism was developed among the ancient Hebrews and is one of the oldest monotheistic religions. Although this religion has existed for thousands of years, there have been progressions from its members as time has continued on. I had the pleasure of interviewing my coworker Chandler, who is part of the Reformed denomination of the Judaism religion. This is a liberal strand of Judaism that has modified many Jewish traditions and beliefs in an effort to adapt with the times. The goal is lessen stress on ritual and personal observance regarding halakha, Jewish law, as non-binding and the individual Jew as autonomous, and acceptance to external influences and progressive values. Chandler's mom was raised Orthodox, but was a part of the Reform movement. As a product of her mom's pivot in religious standing, Chandler's childhood was not the typical Jewish upbringing. Reform Judaism has its own ideals of salvation, clergy, gender, sexual orientation, and the realities of living in the United States as a Jew.
So, hi, my name is Chandler Weinrich. I'm 27 years old. I am an ultrasound tech, and I grew up both Jewish and in Christianity. So going more towards my Jewish heritage, so my grandparents grew up and were born in Poland. They grew up in more of a traditional Orthodox home. Until they had to migrate to America, where they had my mom. And then she grew up in a household that was also traditional Orthodox until she was, I think she explained to me when she was like in college, she started questioning that and going more into a more Reform Jewish faith, and so after she had me, we were still kind of in that Jewish Reform. So I then also hybrid family. My dad is Christian, so I was able to kind of have the hybrid home, hybrid lifestyle in regards to my faith, being both my mom Jewish and my dad Catholic. So that was pretty cool being able to see both sides. Not a lot of people are able to say that. So I feel pretty privileged also with having, being in the healthcare system, that I'm able to see from both sides.
I love that, and I'm sure that has really shaped you into a well-rounded person, and there's definitely good qualities with both traditions or religions. So would you consider being Jewish a religion or a lifestyle? And also Christian?
Ooh. Let me think on that for a second. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that for having my hybrid background with both Christianity and also having the faith of being Jewish, I think I also feel like I have that as my core value. Like I really look back on that to like reflect on decisions I make and stuff, and from there, that's how I make decisions. So I think it's very much, I think I fall back on my faith all the time with every decision that I make. So I think that even if I'm not conscious of it, I think it's like a moral code for me. So I think that they both definitely play a role in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot that the religion plays into your lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a little bit of both as well. Had a chief all-powerful rabbi. These rabbis were appointed by the government and were in charge of making all Jewish decisions. This even included acting as a judge in Jewish matters and counseling the local Jewish community. If you were a Jew, you were expected to listen to the rabbi. As Enlightenment ideas came to fruition, many Jews did not like having one synagogue and one chief per city. There was a want to apply scientific study to Judaism and create morality rather than religion. The hope was, as a religion modernized, it would prove they could be treated as equal citizens with equal rights. The first change included hearing sermons in German rather than Yiddish, stopped wearing kippahs, added organ music, and shortened the length of services. Traditional rabbis rejected these changes, but eventually a shift arose, and the certain events caused a gravitation towards these advances. For example, a city would need their synagogue renovated, and Jews would gather in smaller spaces while repairs were made. The individuals eventually enjoyed the more intimate groups, and the rulings became more popular. In Germany during 1830s, a small group of young liberal rabbis joined together. Their attention had been drawn by the Reform movement gatherings by Rabbi Abraham Geiger. Abraham Geiger was a German rabbi and scholar who is now considered the founding father of Reform Judaism. This group was originally very small, but they were dedicated to developing the religion so that it was compliant with modern times. They discussed which rituals would be kept and which would not continue. For instance, being kosher would not be necessary due to the inconvenience of trying to eat with a non-Jew. In the 1840s, the start of the official reform movement began due to the rapid growth in popularity. In rejection to the change, the term orthodoxy was born on behalf of the opposing traditional views. Regardless, the synods recommended the dietary laws, wearing the kippah, talit, and the tefillin. Prayer reference to a return to Zion, a personal Messiah, and resurrection of the dead were removed. References to the sacrificial cult were excised. Geiger opposed all prayer in Hebrew, but he was not able to convince the synods of this. This was discussion about abolishing circumcision, but the rite remained. We now know that this no longer is a requirement in the Jewish religion. By the end of the 19th century, Reform Judaism was the majority of Jews and still is, and they began migrating to the United States. Regardless of the popularity of Reform Judaism in Germany, her Polish grandparents remained Orthodox. Therefore, her mother was raised as an Orthodox Jew and followed a much more conservative and traditional lifestyle than she did. The Orthodox branch is defined by regarding the Torah, both written and oral, as revealed by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. As Chandler's mother grew older, she was influenced by the Reform rabbis and now follows a more liberal side of the religion. This is common for many Jews in the United States. The two largest organized Jewish denominations in America are Reform and Conservative Judaism. Together have about 5 times as many U.S. members as the historically much older, more strictly observant Orthodox community. Therefore, Chandler is familiar with many traditional Jewish traditions, but not many were carried out in her childhood home. All right, so I'd like to go a little more in depth with the traditions and, how did you celebrate the holidays? Was it hard for your family to navigate the more Christian side of things with Christmas and then also Hanukkah and the Passover, and how did your family balance the two?
Yeah. So I think we balanced it. Actually, I think we balanced it pretty well, just because I think it depended on which side of the family we were going to. Like every family, you kind of depended off of the parents' families going off to either your mom's side of the family or your dad's side of the family. So I don't think that was really much a problem for us. I think it was pretty balanced. Personally, I got to, I personally loved Hanukkah. I think that was a great time to be with family, lighting of the candles. And then quickly after that, celebrating Christmas. So those were my favorite times to be with my family. But also I had friends that were also, had both, one parent having more of a Jewish background versus Christianity. So I was able to also, hear from them the balance between the two.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like having friends that relate to both sides is huge too, because I'm sure you feel a tug in both directions and trying to figure out what you identify with. And I'm sure there's parts of each tradition that you do identify with. So I'm sure that gets confusing at times.
Yes.
Reform Judaism has many differing views from the other movements. It views both oral and written laws as product of human hands like the Torah. But their religion still stresses the importance of maintaining principles of Judaism. Their Jewish homes are centered on family devotion, lifelong study, private prayer, public worship, and daily religious observance. They keep the Sabbath and holy days while continuing to celebrate major life events. They encourage any involvement in the synagogue and community in the hopes of survival of the Jewish tradition and people. The individuals are able to exercise their autonomy. The Shema says, upon reason, heart, and strength, choosing and creating their holiness as people and as community. This includes all sexes with equal treatment. This is important to Reform Jews and defined as egalitarianism. This goes as far as allowing women to be rabbis and lead sermons. This more progressive movement goes against Karl Marx's theory of religion that it is conservative force that prevents social change. Instead, this leans more towards Emily Durkheim's religious theory that religion could be a source for social change. Reform Judaism has socially evolved exponentially without creating false consciousness.
There's a lot of values that are kind of like intermingled with it. I think one of those core things is love. I find that both being Jewish and Catholic, I feel like love has always been this core value that we've had as a family. I feel like that also plays a role being in the healthcare system, showing that love and compassion towards my patients. And I think that having that hybrid lifestyle has taught me, that is something that is very like instilled in me. But going off of that, I think that also having that lifestyle has taught me loyalty, regarding my family. I think that being so in touch with both of, my Jewish heritage, but also my Christianity, I think it's taught me that I need to really have a family like to support me. I think I look back and I really turn to them, when I've hit, with faith, you run through dry spells, you have questions about things, and I think my family has very supported me with it. And I think that coming back to that has very much taught me that loyalty is a big thing, tying it back around to that. I think that having the values of compassion with my faith has taught me to use that with my profession towards my patients. I think that all of it just comes down to, like, people think that you take faith out of it, and I think it does take a lot out of it, but I think there is still a value that is in it with the job that I'm in, even if you don't know it. But
absolutely. And I feel that as we go back to your values, and I know you touched on love, and kind of a segue for me to go into the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
And the gender roles and the sexual orientation and what that kind of looks like in your Reformed church. I know that through the Orthodox Church, it's a little more conservative, maybe not even conservative, but just more traditional in regard to what a family looks like, what love looks like, where you stand as a female in society, and, if you're male or female. So I was just curious if, I know that your mom converted when, before she had you, and I was curious if she had changed her opinion on this as she had grown up as an Orthodox woman and kind of changed into that Reform lifestyle, if she instilled those values in you.
Definitely. I think my mom definitely instilled those values into me. I think that she taught me a lot about my grandparents growing up in an Orthodox church. With my grandparents sadly passing, I've heard snippets from it, but she's told me about the lifestyle that she grew up in, very much living in a very different lifestyle nowadays, even outside of religion. We all are. I think that it's really awesome to see that we are very accepting. Like, even nowadays, we used to only, in the Orthodox tradition, rabbis, you would only see it as being males. Nowadays, we are not only seeing females, we are also seeing transgender people also being rabbis. So I think that nowadays, I think it's very much accepting. It's not very, I think there's a lot we can learn from what it was traditionally, but then we can incorporate now to being more progressive. I think it's very much more accepting, and where I brought up before, love is the core of it all.
I love that, and I love to see the progression of the religion, and although there are still Orthodox and conservative, it is beautiful to see some more acceptance into the religion that's maybe a little more current, more modern, and I know that that's kind of a main thing that the Reform movement was pushing towards, is just trying to stay modern and trying to stay relevant to everyday people and making sure they're touching people of today. So it's really cool to see that transpire through you.
Yes.
Most Reformed theologians place little emphasis on supernatural doctrines, such as the eternity and salvation of one's soul in the future world. Instead, they stress the spread of moral ideals in life. This is commonly referred to as ethical monotheism, which is the stressing of moral behaviors over ritual observances as the true fulfillment of human purpose on earth. They believe in one God, as defined in the Shema, but there is no saving or reason to be saved. Another unique tradition to the Reform movement is confirmation. Confirmation is a sermon in replacement of the bat mitzvah and is considered to be the commitment to the Jewish people. This is one of the youngest life cycle ceremonies, with it beginning within the last 200 years. Originally, this was strictly a boys-only event and usually on the Shabbat of their bar mitzvah, and they were held in schools and homes due to their controversial nature. At a specific area of study, the students were required to have a public examination, and the following day, they would conduct personal confessions of faith to the rabbis. The rabbis would then address the class, recite a prayer, and bless them. As the tradition has grown over the years, the variations of practice have widened. The teachings can be in an intimate setting or a large synagogue service. One aspect that hasn't changed over the movement is the clergy. The clergy still remains in the Reform movement, but in their own way. The current leader of the Reformed Jewish community is Rabbi Reuben Jacob. He is the president of the Union of Reform Judaism, URJ, the congregational arm of the Reform movement in North America, which represents an estimated 1.5 million Reformed Jews and nearly 900 synagogues across the United States and Canada. Rabbis remain encouraged to lead sermons and help guide the Jewish community. The cantor is also still present and a primary member of the clergy. They lead worship events, teach children and adults, run music programs, and more. Traditionally, Jewish religion is very segregated by gender and sexual orientation, but the Reform movement made some changes. Reform Judaism's commitment to social justice for all, women, the disabled, and indeed people from all faiths and backgrounds who lack civil and human rights is a key pillar of the movement, contributing to its popularity among North American Jews. In 1972, the first American movement to ordain a female rabbi took place. Since then, there have been many female rabbis leading congregations and advising the Jewish people. In the 1980s, the seminary began admitting gay and lesbian rabbinical students, and in 2003, it admitted its first transgender student. The movement has also welcomed interfaith couples into its synagogues, meaning that half of married Reformed Jews have a non-Jewish spouse, and many Reformed rabbis officiate at interfaith weddings. These outlooks vary from place to place, but the commonality is that these synagogues are much more accepting and welcoming to other faiths, genders, and sexual identities than more traditional denominations.
About it, I've never been in the situation that someone has been like attacking me for my faith, having Judaism like as on my mom's side, because I feel like nowadays I'm able to have more conversations with people, being partially Catholic versus Judaism. So I find that I just try to fill out the room in regards to that. But have a family to look back on.
Absolutely. So you're saying kind of through the diversity of school, as a kid, you never really felt super bullied, but that even if you had felt even a slight bit, you kind of had your family to rely on.
Exactly. They were always there, especially with my mom. My mom, she practices more. So she's always been someone that I can turn to ask those questions, or answer those questions that I have regarding it. So she's a really good person to talk to as like a mother figure. Obviously, it's great having my cousins that I can turn to as well, who are practicing and that can, kind of relate, being a 27-year-old modern day and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've been looking at the news recently, there's a lot of kind of controversy in regard to the Black Lives Movement, but also there's been kind of a rise in the anti-Semitism problem, and it's a pretty frightening situation. And I was just curious if you felt like that is a growing problem, or if you've experienced anything in regard to that, or seen anything in regard to that.
Yeah, I feel like personally I've never gone through something, but it's definitely there. You definitely feel like the ripple effect of it all. It's definitely, scary times right now with it all, definitely. But definitely not wearing the traditional garments. Definitely, having to be more reserved about what I say and do, but going back to family and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously being in the Reform, part of the Reform movement, I'm sure that you don't have to be as traditional or wear those garments like you said. Do you have any family members that choose to, regardless of the fear, or is most of your family kind of on the same page in that regard?
I think as a family, we're on the same, and do I say the same in that regards?
Yeah, same in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more on the same of that regards. Definitely, one of those tricky questions that, you can definitely talk for yourself, but as a family, you get snippets from it, but you don't truly know how they're feeling about something, not trying to, speak for them or anything like that. But yeah, I think all on the same in that regards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of those older generations tend to be a little more quiet. Do you know if your grandparents ever gave you any insight onto maybe some experiences through the Holocaust, or anything that you could share in reference to that, or even hearsay through your mom?
Yeah. Mostly, sadly, my grandparents passed away, when I was at a young age, so I don't really remember, the specifics of conversations I had with them. I remember feelings I had with them, though, that your grandparents, loved you, and that, you were having an important conversation. But when you look back at it, being 27 and looking back at yourself when you're a 6-year-old, you remember sitting on a couch, but not the specific things that you were saying. But regarding the Holocaust, I think that was a very hard thing for my grandparents to kind of open up about with my mom, especially since they grew up and born in Poland and, then came to America. Even I think my mom has a hard time, kind of opening up about it, because I think they felt that raw sadness, that I think that even my mom only got snippets from my grandparents, her parents, about it. And I think that she's trying to, explain it the best she can to me about it. But I think it's very much that I can only get a little bit from her. I would like to ask my mom more about it. I think it's very much I'm growing up more now that I think that I could definitely have a more personable conversation about it. But when you're talking to your mom about, something about her parents that was so raw and awful, and I think that I think nowadays I could probably answer it. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's a shame that now that you have more curiosity about it, that you couldn't go grab your grandparents and ask them, but I'm sure one day maybe your mom will be willing to share some more of those stories.
Yes.
But again, it's kind of a sensitive subject for a lot of Polish, German, Jews in that regard. So that makes a lot of sense. Despite the shift of inclusion within the Jewish religion, anti-Semitism has a constant presence in American Jewish history. Their religious practice, unique accents, and surnames led to scapegoating based on age-old stereotypes that found their origins in Europe long ago. During the Civil War, anti-Jewish intolerance was rampant among the Union and Confederacy, with accusations that Jewish people were helping an opposing side of the conflict as well as selling military supplies at inflated prices to make profit. Even today, there is a rise in bigotry due to the anxieties of globalization, economic inequality, COVID-19 pandemic, and changing demographics. Overall, this can make everyday life as an American Jew filled with fear and, in result, a change of actions. These changes include limiting their activities, concealing their Jewishness due to their concerns with anti-Semitism. 39% of American Jews avoid posting content online about their views, 25% refrain from wearing or carrying traditional items that identify them as a Jew, and 17% avoid certain places and events for their safety and comfort. In the end, there are several categories of Jewish religious identity and how the synagogue carry out their beliefs, but specifically the Reform movement has caught popularity and impact on many. Chandler's family has a rich history of Judaism and is a prime example of how, after many generations, views can change. The Reform movement is not only about keeping the tradition alive, but making change to conform to modern times. The salvation, clergy, views on gender, and sexual orientation all look very different under different Jewish households. But at the end of the day, they are part of the Jewish family. Each individual has their own experiences living in the United States as a Jew and the struggles that come along with it.